The Lincoln penny series was first introduced in 1909, and as is so often the case in transitional years, mint errors and especially varieties do tend to creep into the picture. So let's take a look at all of the major varieties that exist for the 1909 Lincoln cent. Design varieties are up first, and here the best known and often mentioned VDB coins have to be the obligatory first mention. Victor D. Brenner was responsible for designing the Lincoln cent, the first circulating coin to feature a former president, and issued to coincide with the 100th anniversary of his birth as well. 100 years later, the mint would naturally once again choose to celebrate the birth of the nation's 16th president with the 4-coin Lincoln bicentennial penny set, depicting his life from a humble birth in rural Kentucky, the formative years in Indiana, professional life in Illinois, and all the way to the presidency in Washington, D.C. But back to the wheat cent, which, as I mentioned, was designed by sculptor Victor D. Brenner, and as such, it was by custom his right to place his initials discreetly somewhere on the design. He chose to do so on the reverse of the coin, just between the two wheat stalks at the very bottom, hence the name of the coin, the VDB cent. This was issued in both Philadelphia and San Francisco, but apparently the design ruffled some feathers as the issue had barely hit the coining presses before an order was given to halt production completely. Mint officials decided that the most expeditious way to deal with the problem was to simply remove the VDB from the design altogether, and so was born the first design variety, the VDB and no VDB coin for the 1909 penny. Now today, the VDB coins from either mint are both more sought after and more valuable by sheer virtue of the fact that there were fewer of them minted. The Philadelphia coin is the most obtainable as it saw nearly 28 million coins minted, so you can't exactly call it rare, although compared to the 72 million coins with the no VDB variety example, it is comparatively so, not as easy to find. Now, the San Francisco or S-mint coins, especially the VDB coin, on the other hand, is a completely different story. San Francisco minted 1.825 million no VDB cents in 1909, so already a relatively low number for the Lincoln series. But the 1909 S VDB penny only saw 484,000 coins leave the mint before production was halted. In today's market, an average circulated 1909 penny would fetch about $5 to $10. Maybe, with a 1909 VDB coin doubling that to around $10 or $20, moving up from there to a decent graded coin at, say, the MS64 level. Then the 09 commands a price of $50 to $100 with ease, and the 09 VDB manages to raise that to between $80 and $150 at the same grade point. During 2022, a gem beauty of a coin at the grade level of PCGS MS67 plus red was sold at auction for a highly respectable $7,200. Similarly, during 2021, an 09 VDB penny by contrast, graded by PCGS as MS68 red, which places it at the very top of the conditional census, was sold at auction for an almost unbelievable $56,400. Now, like I mentioned, these San Francisco coins are significantly scarcer, and here prices do start to rise quite dramatically. The 1909 S Lincoln penny in an average circulating grade is already worth around $100 on its own, with an MS64 coin comfortably selling between $600 and $700 each. Then add the VDB initials to the S mint mark, and you are looking at $1,000 coin in circulating grades already. Stepping up to an MS64, you are starting to look at a $3,500 to and possibly $4,500 coin in today's market. 2020 saw the auction of a top-level registry set example of the 1909 S wheat cent in a PCGS slab graded as MS67 red, selling at auction for $16,800. But the 1909 S VDB cent has to take the crown here as well. During the spring of 2022, a coin graded as MS67 red by PCGS was sold at auction for no less than $168,000. Now that's hardly all there is. In terms of design varieties, the 09 penny has yet more to offer, and it constantly amazes me that almost no one talks about this either. When it comes to the 1982 penny, it's generally agreed that you have to collect all 7 or 8 varieties, depending on how you count them. The wide and close AM varieties of the 1990s are also very well known, and that's not even broaching the number of large and small date types that managed to pop up through the years. But the 1909 deep and shallow N types largely fly under the radar for some reason. On this coin, you can look at the letter N of United to find that some are shallow cut, where the connecting sections are almost parallel to one another. And then on the design varieties number 2 and 4, you have a deeply cut relief with sharper edges and a more harshly cut, well-defined N, if you would. These appear on both the VDB and no VDB coins as well in both cases. Although the deep cut N VDB coin is unique to Philadelphia, whereas the shallow N VDB as well as the deep N no VDB and shallow N no VDB types are found for all 3 working mints. And because the design variety is not widely sought by most collectors, it does not really detract from or either add value to the coin whatsoever. Now, moving on to double die varieties. There are quite a few to look out for on the 1909 pennies. Beginning with double die reverse varieties, there are about a dozen or so very minor varieties to look out for. But without diving too deep into minutiae, almost all of those fall into one of 2 broader categories, most of which share largely the same characteristics as the ones I'll point out in just a minute. These are distorted or distended hub-doubled coins. The first is an example of a class 2 or distorted hub-doubled coin. Here, the doubling is clearly seen on the letters of E pluribus unum. This is boldest on the various U's within the motto, as well as the L of pluribus. Again, the base of the letter E is also a point of interest for this variety. As I mentioned already, there are numerous other varieties that share similar characteristics, but on this specific coin, die markers include a small die gouge on the base of the L in pluribus, a diagonal die scratch towards the left of the T in cent, and a long diagonal scratch from west to east through the C of cent. But not all of the varieties will share these exact die markers, but the doubling will appear similar on most. The other grouping I mentioned are the distended hub-doubled coins, or the class 6 doubled coins. These may be a little more difficult to diagnose, but your primary focus should still be on the letters of E pluribus unum. But in most cases, the letters will simply appear thicker than they ought to be. This is especially true in the present example, where all the letters appear to be fat or really thick at the base of the letters. The dots separating the words are especially noticeable, with fantastic doubling here, where they are not so much round, but rather elongated. The tops of the letters 1 are also similarly affected. Unfortunately, none of these double die varieties are listed in the Cherry Picker's Guide, and as such, neither PCGS nor NGC will attribute them as varieties. They'll be happy to slap them for you, but they will not attribute the variety on the label. If you're looking to grade one of them as a variety, then Anax might be a better option for you. Because of this low market recognition factor, the premium for these varieties over the base coin is also relatively low. Moving on from there to more recognizable or better known varieties, we find a double die obverse variety for the 1909 VDB cent. This is again a distended hub-doubled coin. As a result, the defining characteristic is additional thickness towards the design elements. In this case, the letters of Liberty are all thicker in their vertical sections than compared to a normal coin. But the numbers on the date are the real stars of the show, with additional thickness and, in an early die state, even fair separation lines on the tails of both number 9s. Depending on the die state of the specific coin that you might have, die markers for this variety might include die chips inside the cavities of the letter B in Liberty, as well as similar effect on the R of the same word. Although it should be noted that the die chip in the R specifically is also found on non-variety coins as well. In later die states, clash marks can also be seen towards the right of Lincoln's throat, as well as the corresponding clash marks on the lower end of the C in cent on the reverse of the coin. In 2021, a coin like this, graded by PCGS as MS67 Red, was sold at auction for $9,600. However, the 1909 VDB cent has a far stronger and more impressive double die variety to look for as well. This coin is the result of offset hub doubling, with a fairly strong spread on the obverse of the coin. Most of the doubling here displays towards the southeasterly direction to a lesser or greater degree. There is some doubling to be seen on Lincoln's lips to start with, although this is definitely not the strongest doubling on this particular variety by far. We move then to the letters of Liberty, where the B, the E, R, T, and Y are all doubled quite nicely, with the doubling becoming stronger and more defined as you move closer to Lincoln's shoulder, or to the center of the coin, if you will. The strongest doubling, however, is reserved for the date, or at least the first 3 digits of the date. Here, there is very bold doubling on the number 1, the first 9, as well as the 0, and this is definitely your primary place of interest when looking for this particular variety. During the 2018 ANA's World's Fair of Money, a coin matching this description, graded by PCGS as MS67 Red, was sold at auction for $12,000. Having dealt with the double die varieties, we can now move on to the San Francisco Mint in order to locate the repunched mintmark variety coins available for this date. There are 2 repunched mintmark variety types to look for here. Both are located on the regular 1909 S, or the no VDB type coin. First up is the very well-known and Red Book listed S over horizontal S type, where the initial S mint mark was placed onto the working die sideways, or in a horizontal orientation. The second impression was thus necessitated in order to correct the orientation of the S in its upright position. Looking towards the lower rounding of the S to see what remains of the serif from the initial S impression, the biggest challenge with this variety is in finding a coin sufficiently early die state as to see the horizontal orientation of the initial impression, as this may fade with later die states, though it does remain very clear nonetheless that the mint mark was repunched. For this coin, the finest known example, standing at a grade of MS67 Red from PCGS, was sold at auction in 2018 during the sale of the ESM collection for $24,000. The second repunched mintmark variety from the 1909 S Lincoln penny is perhaps not as widely known as the previous coin, owing, I suspect, to the fact that it is omitted from the popular Red Book, although it is far scarcer to locate and resultingly in greater demand by specialist collectors at least. The initial S mint mark in this case was placed towards the north east of the final position, with clear doubling on the top serif, as well as the corresponding orientation on the bottom serif. Although in the case of the bottom serif, it is not quite as visually dramatic. Similar doubling is then also present towards the lower rounding of the S as well. In 2019, one of these variety coins, a beautiful fiery copper red example slabbed by PCGS as MS66 red, was sold at auction for $3,290. And that largely concludes all of the variety types of note for the 1909 Lincoln cent. Let's take a quick look at the different variety coins that you can look for and find within the 1910 wheat cent. First in line would be a repunched mint mark variety from the San Francisco Mint. This, the first of two similar varieties, is not the boldest, but still manages to have impressive doubling on the S mint mark towards the south of the final impression, with mainly the serif and lower rounding of the S being the main pickup points for this variety. It is a curiosity that, mainly due to the already relatively high values of the base coin in high grades especially, the premiums for this variety tend to stay on the lower end. Still, in 2023, a PCGS graded AU50 example of this type was sold at auction for $169. The next coin that then follows is, well, would logically then be the other repunched mint mark variety, also from the San Francisco Mint, as Denver would only start producing Lincoln coins in the following year. Here, the doubling, or well, I should probably say repunching rather, is really quite strong. An indication that the initial S mint mark must have been very strong is the fact that most of the first punching remains visible underneath the secondary and final placements. Immediately you should notice the top portion of the second S mint mark is seen towards the north of the primary mint mark, almost doubled perfectly in relation to the final placement. The bottom serif is also then seen to display with the same effect, and even the middle section of the letter S can be detected in most examples found. This coin is by far the most popular variety of the 1910 Lincoln series, and manages to attain consistently higher prices in any grade. A rather extreme example of this would be in 2018, when Stax Bowers sold a PCGS graded MS67 red example of this coin at auction for the closing price of $19,200. Now, another example of a variety coin for the 1910 penny can be found on the Philadelphia Mint example of this coin, and was only recently confirmed in early 2023, discovered by Sean Tew. This is an example of a Class 3 or Design Hub double die, in this case a reverse die used in the production of 1909 pennies, or in other words an older reverse die variety, most likely from an earlier form of the Galvano, was probably inadvertently used to create a new reverse die, which is why it is also being referred to as a transitional variety. Doubling is most noticeable on the T and E of United, especially in the upper flag of the letters, displaying towards the right, in the northeasterly direction, creating a partially filled effect with clear notching towards the south. The left downstroke of the M of America is also doubled towards the northeast along the entire length of that particular aspect of the letter. The reverse of the coin is usually seen paired with an obverse that displays signs of a die clash below Lincoln's chin, and a small die crack running diagonally towards the right, from the lower left corner of his bust. Now, as of recording this, PCGS has not recognized, well, or at least slabbed, any examples of this coin that I'm aware of, certainly. However, NGC does recognize the variety and is slabbing them with the 1910 reverse of 1909 attribution. Now, because it is such a newly discovered variety, there is no auction record or available pricing data to point to, but $50 to $100 premium per coin would not be an unreasonable assumption, depending on grade, of course. Then finally, there is the matte-proof version of the coin. Now this is not a variety in the strictest sense, but rather just a proof version of the same coin with a matte finish. It is highly unlikely that you will come across it searching in coin rolls, but it is important to know how to tell the difference all the same. The matte proof coin for this year typically has noticeably sharper details on Lincoln's beard, as well as the details of the hair behind Lincoln's ear. Comparing a high-grade business strike example of this coin with a matte proof version is the best way to illustrate the difference. It also highlights the differences in texture of the surface of the coin, where the proof coin has a finely but uniformly granulated or sandblasted surface, oftentimes missing from the regular coins. The rim of the coin should also be sharply squared off and not beveled or rounded in any way. These matte-proof coins came from the mint wrapped in yellow tissue paper, which contained sulfur and caused fantastical toning at best, or resulted in coins turning from fully red to completely brown at worst. Now, these matte-proof coins are very popular today and valuable as a result. In 2023, a PCGS graded MS67 example of the coin was sold at auction for $18,000. But the record still belongs to a coin sold at auction in 2019, a PCGS graded MS67 plus red example that managed to raise $52,875. The 1911 wheat cent has a number of valuable variety coins that you can look for. Let's start off with the San Francisco Mint that has a very attractive, not to mention very popular, variety coin with collectors. This is the 1911 S/S repunched mintmark variety. This is a fantastic variety where the repunching is really very clear, and the remnants of the initial punching can be clearly seen towards the west of the final impression of the S mintmark. Both the bottom serif as well as the top rounding of the mintmark are clearly, well, for the practical purposes, almost doubled towards the left. This should hold true even in lower grades and in later die state examples of the coin as well. In later die states, the top rounding does become less pronounced and becomes less obvious, really. But the initial impression of the bottom serif should remain legible all the same. During 2022, a PCGS graded example of this coin slabbed as MS65 brown was sold at public auction for the sum of $1,750. As there are no major varieties for the Philadelphia Mint coin, then we head back west to the Denver Mint, where again our focus will fall on a repunched mintmark variety. In fact, more than just one, so let's start off with the first one of these. This is the most subtle of all of these varieties mentioned, to be sure. Look towards the bottom of the D mintmark. The base of the letter should be doubled towards the southwest, with almost no separation between the initial and final impressions. There should also be a small dot towards the southwest of the top serif, which is almost easier to spot, to be honest. Now, an early die state is essential for this variety. Here, in contrast, is a late die state and low-grade example of the same variety, and as you can see, it's almost impossible to diagnose and attribute the coin in this state. It's a fairly rare example with few known examples to report, and because it's so subtle, it's not very popular with collectors either, other than with the most die-hard of variety specialists. So expect about a 20% premium over the base coin, or about $20 to $150 depending on the grade of the example you have. Now, our next variety coin has a lot in common with the coin we just discussed, but this time the doubling is displayed towards the southeast instead of the southwest. The doubling, or well, rather I should say the evidence of the repunching on this coin is a lot clearer than on the previous example though, thankfully. Look towards the base of the D, where there should be clear signs of the first impression, from the serif all the way up towards the middle of the rounding of the D. In addition, the top serif of the initial punching should also still be found just towards the south of the top serif of the final placement. The die state doesn't really affect this variety in my experience, other than the detail around the bottom rounding of the D getting a little bit softer or washed out. In 2019, a coin that matches this description was sold online, slapped by PCGS as AU50 for $398. Then we have a really nice repunched mintmark variety for this issue, and easily the boldest one, especially from the Denver Mint issues. On this coin, the initial D mintmark was rotated or tilted in a counterclockwise rotation, necessitating the repunching in order to properly orient the mintmark in relation to the date. Look inside the cavity of the D, towards the bottom left corner, and what remains of the tilted straight bar of the first D should be plainly seen. If you're not sure, then compare it to a normal version of the same coin, and it should be clear immediately. In addition to this, the top serif of the D is also affected. It appears to be split, almost, with the initial serif seen towards the south of the final impression. Because the repunching is so bold on this variety, die state or even grade won't affect it that much at all. The lower diagonal section of the first impression should remain perfectly clear regardless of all of these factors. During 2022, a PCGS graded VF25 example of this coin was sold at auction for a total price of $1,005. And then the final variety is again a repunched mintmark from the Denver Mint, or well, to be more accurate, a 1911 D over D over D triple punched mintmark variety. In this case, the top serif of the secondary impression is seen southwest of the final placement. It almost may appear to be just a simple die bump, but it is in fact the remnant of the prior impression of the D punch. The initial impression, or again what remains thereof, is seen towards the southwest of the final mintmark. It is very faint, but there should be a slight raised section representing what was once the lower right rounding of the initial D. In 2023, a coin like this, graded as MS63 Brown, was sold at auction for $630. Which then leads us nicely into the sole variety coin that is noted for this date. It is a quite attractive repunched mintmark from the San Francisco Mint. On this coin, the primary mintmark was punched directly over and slightly towards the west of the initial placement, creating doubling on the S towards the right. Unfortunately, the coin is not yet recognized by either PCGS or NGC at this time, but Anox fortunately has a more enlightened view on this subject. In December of 2018, a VF35 graded coin from Anox was sold at auction for $46. A single extremely minor repunched mintmark is known for the San Francisco Mint coin in this case, which only shows very slight notching in the lower serif. However, this variety is extremely minor. It is not recognized by PCGS nor NGC, and there is no listing for it in the Cherry Picker's Guide either, and as such, its main value is for educational or academic purposes, with no real market premium above the base coin itself. We now take a closer look at the valuable and ever-popular 1917 double-die obverse Lincoln cent variety coin. The variety displays strong counterclockwise spread on most of the obverse details. This includes the details of Lincoln's coat, the bow tie, his lips, eye, and even the details of the hair as well to some degree. But the strongest doubling for this coin definitely appears on the legend and the date, beginning with the letters of Liberty. There is some more minor doubling on the letters that are closer to the rim of the coin, especially the horizontal sections of the L, where doubling appears to the north. Similar doubling can also be found on the B, both inside the cavity of the roundings of the letter and towards the top as well. This is easy to spot in a high grade, but in lower grades it might only appear as additional thickness on the affected areas of the letters instead, especially on the two already mentioned letters. In my opinion though, the best doubling on this coin can be found on the letters of In God We Trust, and the best part is that the doubling can clearly be seen on every single letter due to the fact that the rotation during the hubbing process took place in a counterclockwise direction. The doubling here is seen to display towards the right of all of the letters of In God We Trust. Die state isn't really much of a concern for this issue due to the doubling being so strong in most areas. However, in some coins, a combination of a weaker strike and a later die state may conspire to at least conceal the doubling to a tiny bit, as can be seen here on the letters of In. Both coins are graded as MS67 red, but the coin towards your left is in an early die state with a sharp strike, and the one to your right is in a later die state. Looking specifically at the letters of Trust, the doubling is not as crisp, lacking the clean lines you would hope to see at least. And looking towards the top of the letters, you can see the signs of die deterioration beginning to take form. So just keep that in mind when you're comparing and contrasting your coins to photos of known examples. The hallmark of this variety though remains the date. Here the doubling is definitely the boldest and easiest to spot, with every number doubled strongly towards the southwest. There should be clear notching on the top left and bottom right of the number 1, strong doubling on the rounding of the 9, with notching in the upper curl and a split in the tail of the 9 as well. The second number 1 should be doubled in the really much the same way as the first, but with a slightly stronger amount of doubling due to the fact that it's closer to the rim of the coin. And then the top flag of the 7 should almost completely be doubled towards the south, but not so much that separation has occurred. And the lower tip of the number should then be doubled almost exactly due south as well, as an indication of the coin's true rarity and why the coin is so expensive. Despite how strong the doubling is on the coin, it took almost 60 years for the variety to achieve widespread recognition, with the Discovery coin only coming to light in 1977. Luckily though, the doubling is sufficiently strong so that the variety should be detectable in almost any condition, from high-grade mint state examples right down to low-grade, worn-down and heavily circulated coins. Using the date as the chief point of interest for the coin, as well as the letters of We Trust as an example, let's take a look at a few different grades so you can know what to expect if you pull a coin like this from a coin roll or find it in a mixed bag or something like that. First up is an MS63 brown example. As you would expect, since this is still a mint state coin, the details are still easy to detect all round with no wear. The separation lines on the date are a little soft, but this is down to the strike quality of the coin more than than anything else. And just out of interest's sake, here is an MS62 example of the coin in a later die state. You can see the die deterioration with the distinct trail lines beginning to form towards the right of the letters in this case, although the doubling itself is still very clear. Alright, so next up is an AU53 example of the coin. You can see that the wear is beginning to set in this case. The doubling on the letters of "In God We Trust" is still extremely strong and shouldn't be affected at this grade level to any significant degree. The date is also still very clear, and the notching in the first 1 and the 9 remain fully intact. The separation lines on the second one are all but gone here already though, leaving instead a number 1 that is both longer and thicker than it really should be, dropping down to a VF35 from there, and here you can start to see the rigors of circulation taking its toll. The clear notching on the 1 becomes less clear, and the separation lines on the flag of the 7 may also have become worn down at this point, leaving numbers that are thicker than they should be instead. On the date, the number 9 still remains the best indication of the doubling, while the letters of "In God We Trust" should still be clearly doubled. In an F10, a grade that should be quite common for this date, all that remains of the once clear doubling is the additional thickness on the numbers, as well as the unmistakable doubling on the top curl of the 9. Similarly, and depending on the wear pattern of the coin that you have, the doubling on the letters should now also become more obfuscated. The next step down is then a VG8 grade. Honestly, not a lot should change from the F10 coin discussed before, since most of the doubling is not seen on the extreme high points of the design. But moving down further to a G6, well, this is about as low as you want to go without the coin basically turning into a blank disc again. Under extreme magnification, the notching of the 9 could remain. Otherwise, the additional thickness of the numbers is your best bet for identifying the doubling here. And at this very low grade, the same pretty much goes for the letters of "In God We Trust" as well. The coin has surprisingly few reliable die markers to help establish authenticity, although in an earlier die state there is a diagonal die scratch from the right serif of the T in Liberty traveling down towards the center of the letter, with a less obvious die scratch connecting the T towards the Y as well. And the reverse notes a small die gouge traveling south from the right of the second U in Unum, although this is not present in all examples of the coin, meaning that it probably happened sometime during the minting run for this issue. The auction record for this coin was set in 2019, when a PCGS graded MS67 Plus red example was sold at auction by Stax Bowers for $120,000. If you liked this video, then consider watching a similar video about the 2004 double die reverse penny next. For the World Numismatic News, I am Numisman saying thank you for watching, keep collecting, and have a fantastic day.